Welcoming everyone. Ooh, got it.
Got it.
Welcome to the Coding Dojo. This is the Coding Dojo Anniversary Edition. So unlike almost every other time, we will not be tackling a brand new challenge today with a driver and navigator and host the way we normally do. Instead, we're going to be code reviewing some submissions for our anniversary challenge and awarding some fabulous prizes. So that should be pretty exciting. The challenge itself was related to the game called Block Soars. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go check it out. There are a few different places online where you can play the game for yourself. But the short version is there's a rectangle and it flops around on a grid. And we want to try to move that rectangle around and eventually have it find the shortest path from its starting location to some final location. So to do that, we had 5 different levels, starting with create your block, move it one space, move it a bunch of spaces, give it a target, have it move to that space, have it move, given a target, have it move to that space using the shortest path. And then finally on level 5, do the same thing except dodging obstacles, which, you know, depending on smoothly together, you can run into bumps between each one, and it really sort of builds on itself. So I think first we will look at, I have to pull it again.
The worst for first.
Let's see. I want to say yours was 309. Let's see. No, it was not. You were 313. I guess I could share my screen so you guys can watch me peck at my keyboard real quick. There we go. Looks like everybody can see. Have to type the whole thing.
There we go.
All right. Can everybody see that? Is that too big, large enough? I'm going to close this side window here.
Yeah.
That'll make it a little easier to see.
Yeah, looks better.
There we go. Okay, so to start off, again, level 1 is modeling a block and moving it at least one space given a single character. So it looks like what Dakota did here was to create a class, right? This is the typical JavaScript sort of class object-oriented based approach. And this class has some, what are these called when they're part of a class?
Attributes, maybe?
Attributes, there you go.
Yeah.
So he's got some attributes. He's got his starting position, his current position, and he's keeping up with 3, looks like Booleans here to indicate whether or not the block is tall, vertical, or horizontal. So I think the first place I'm going to stop is here with the Booleans. What do we think about sort of keeping track of the orientation of the block using these 3 different values?
Well, I think it works, but you might consider the fact that, like, you can only be one. You can only be like in one position at one time, right? Like you can't be tall and vertical. You can't be vertical and horizontal, right? So having each one have a true or false value might be a little bit of overkill. Like if it was, yeah. So if like you could have like 2 or 3 being true at once, you might want to do it that way. And also, I thought, by the way, side note, I thought it was really interesting the way you set up that ternary with like the second
Me
one
too.
being yeah. I was like, I've never really seen that. That's kind of
Yeah,
like that the way the end of it is like another
conditional.
Boolean
Yeah.
conditional to be evaluated, which is kind of cool. But you might, if I were doing it, I might just have like a what would you say, like an orientation, something called maybe orientation or something better than that, and just have it be, it could be equal to tall, it could be, or T even, right, V or H maybe, and then you could just like switch between, because as soon as you, because otherwise you're going to have to like set one to true and the other 2 to false all the time, which could get kind of tiresome and maybe buggy too.
And a lot to check on, right? Yeah. It introduces a lot of stuff you have to check, which is.
And I think that's my comment, right? Like, and first of all, I want to say, and I guess I should have said this earlier, right? Like, we're super pumped about these solutions. You guys did great.
Yeah,
So, part of this code review process is not about like, being critical or anything like that. It's really about like, observing opportunities to learn. So, I want to start off with that. I should have started off with that earlier. Not that, Charles or Dennis prompted that in any way. I think they were being extremely constructive. I just want to set that sort of ground rule for all of us.
definitely.
Yeah, I think what they're pointing out here is the thing that I notice, right, is when you've got these three different Booleans, you've introduced a possibility or a bunch of possibilities actually that you may not actually want, right? So there's not any constraint really against having a block that is both tall and vertical or tall and horizontal or horizontal and vertical at the same time at the programming language level. And so what you've introduced is actually additional work for yourself as the programmer to check and make sure that every time you're setting one to true, you're setting the other two to false, right? And every time you create things that you as the human being have to keep up with, you're creating opportunities to forget stuff because our brains are human brains that you know occasionally forget things or just make a typo somewhere or something like that. So I think that was my comment about
Yeah,
that as well. And I might use, I come from a little bit more of a static typing preference perspective on this. So I would even suggest, enums are a little bit weird in JavaScript, but you can do them. And this is probably one of those places where I would either use an enum to keep track of what state it is, or I might, and this may be something that I point out again, I might create three different classes of block. A tall block, a vertical block, and a horizontal block, and then just sort of switch out which one I've got depending on what the orientation is. So those are a couple of different ways that I might think about representing that state.
Some really smart ideas. I really appreciate all the feedback, and I do want to preface that you guys be as tough on me as you can.
yeah,
I've never been code reviewed. This is the first time anyone's actually looked at my code in this kind of way, so I'm really looking forward to it. I think that's brilliant. I really appreciate that because I've never thought about it in that way because they all do kind of fit into one. So I like that.
awesome. And yeah, I'll just say, Dakota, I think that's a really good attitude to have. Code reviews can feel a little intrusive, or the person who wrote the code is vulnerable because you're being criticized by your peers, and criticism isn't bad. It's how we grow. And so like just putting yourself out there for us to look at your code and help you see improvement areas is a really valuable skill. It's an awesome thing to take part in. And I'll also say, as the developer, like myself included, I'll often, you start on an idea, right? Train of thought. And so you're always building off of that first idea you had. So maybe your initial idea solved part of the problem. And then the next idea you have is like a way to make your current state work with the initial way you solved the problem. And what that introduces is a lot of like, at the beginning of your code, and then you build on top of it. I do that all the time. And so that's one of the most valuable things I've taken away from having code reviews is, I may have started down a train of thought that I progressed down when there could have been an easier way or a different way, or, but yeah, I guess feedback on just this is, we want to do defensive programming or robust programming. And generally when one thing that we write is dependent on, or it impacts two other things, we start to create entropy for ourselves. And so we have to put in more work to keep track of the entropy we create. So if we can limit the state of what we're doing to a finite scope and then just work on that scope, I think it saves us trouble in the long run. So
yeah, everything you guys have talked about and mentioned, I've mentally worked through how I was writing the code, and I was like, they're right. They're not to that part yet, but they're completely right.
yeah.
Yep. This code, right? So if we look at something incorrect, right, because you're going to be more familiar with your code than we are. All right, so I think that that gets us through kind of looking at how we're managing state here and how you're representing the block and sort of what attributes are on that block. So we can take a look at some of these class methods here for moving the block. So the first thing I'll notice is that we have a move method that is, well, let's see, that was 106. So 95-ish lines long. Do we have commentary on that?
Yeah. So this kind of addresses what we said earlier, but besides that, it appears to be fairly redundant in that even if you went this approach, it looks like those inner blocks, because if this tall, else this vertical, it looks like those could be potentially abstracted out to just a function that does things, or a method in a class.
So this is one of the benefits I find, and I don't work in JavaScript a lot, so I may just be blowing smoke at this point. But one of the benefits I find for breaking functions down into smaller pieces is that when things fail, your error messages are a lot more helpful, right? So in this in this instance, for example, if I passed, like an R to move direction and it worked fine, but if I passed an L, it failed, then my error message is just going to tell me that my move direction function, something went wrong in there, right? But it's not necessarily going to point me to which one. And so I have to then go back and kind of dig and either run a debugger to figure out, like, well, what letter did I pass in, and kind of trace those steps forward. Where one thing that you could probably do really easily to simplify this and give yourself just better error messages would be to break this out. So you could have move direction serve as like a dispatch, where it's just like move direction. If direction equals you, then move up, and then put your if direction code in there. If it's down, then move down. If it's right, move right. If it's left, move left. And then if you're running it and you run into an error, your error message, your stack trace is going to say, oh, well, I found the error in the move left function, right? So you would already have like cut down the amount of code that you needed to look through to figure out where the error was by like 75%, right? You would have eliminated like 3/4 of the possible places to find an error just by breaking those out into smaller functions without even really changing what the functions did very much. Plus, I mean, it's a little easier to read, right? Like you could look at a move direction function that does that and pretty quickly see, okay, yeah, that does exactly what I expect it to. The other thing that I would, again, personally try to do, because I'm a paranoid guy, is if I had such a dispatch function, I'd probably have at the bottom of it, like, if I get to this point and I haven't called another function, I'm going to throw an error, right? Because you passed me a Q for a direction or whatever. And I throw that error, pass back out the input I got that says, hey, this was the I don't know how to move in direction Z. And then you could, again, you'd have that error message and it would help you, debug problems in your program.
And dispatch functions are like also really useful in web development, right? If you can think of, maybe a user is sending a request that gets sent to your dispatcher, right? And you don't want them to be able to do things that they're not supposed to do inadvertently, right? Because you didn't program defensively. So you leave yourself open to interpret the request that they send. And maybe it's like, typing in a password or a username. And it's like when the username comes in, the password comes in, I do this thing, right? And if you have a dispatch function, that goes to your dispatcher. It can only run the thing that's in that area, right? So it will only try to run that based on what it's been sent, and it doesn't, really. So it just restricts the scope of what can be run. It protects you against potential attacks or vulnerabilities or whatever coming from the front end to the back end, and you don't accidentally, because a user passed in some silly string, dump a little bit of your database out to see on the front end. Stuff like that. So helpful there too. Brenda, you got like a fuzz going on over your mic. It's like kind of sounding Charlie Brownish.
It's straight up Charlie Brown.
It's giving Mars rover, Brenda. You come a little closer to Earth.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, I kind of switched microphone. So the other thing that kind of pops out right off the bat for me is the whole if-else thing. Maybe a switch would have been better, switching on the direction, and then kind of having a default case there, kind of handle what Eric and Dennis were saying. But if this is the direction, then do this stuff. If it's a valid direction, do this. Default in a way handles your error case that, oh, none of this was there. The default is this, and we will just put the error or to the message in the wrong direction or something like that. Just my 2 cents to add there. This whole if else thing. With the addition of say more functions, the way Eric was pointing out, can in a way be, I think, maybe written in a switch case more in a more readable.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. It's a good way to look at it. I think Matthew has a switch. So if you're not familiar with it, we might get to it as we go, but I think he set it up. But yeah, you just, in that instance, you could switch on direction, and then you have cases where each thing is, a direction, and you do something based on a case. So
Is a switch and a dispatch, are those kind of similar? Is that what you?
For me, anytime I start going over 4 or 5 if-else and nested if-else loops, kind of makes sense to think in because here if you see the main is if direction is U, then it's a whole bunch of if-else statements. And if direction is D, then it's a whole bunch of if-else statements. You can move the whole if-else part of U into a function and to move up or something. And you just have a switch making switch direction is up to the move of just kind of breaking your code into this thing, into multiple smaller pieces of that you can handle. And once you do that, so the whole if this dot all else if this dot multiple basically becomes parameters to the move direction function where you're passing the direction and the default values of the flags. So what Eric was alluding to earlier, or Dennis, that a bunch of this is redundant code that can be managed better. I don't know if that kind of answers. I was talking about switch case statement with an if-else, but kind of mimicking the same thing as a dispatch. As a dispatch function, the case is switch case is if-else.
Yeah, maybe I'll write a small example in the chat of what a dispatch function kind of would look like.
Yeah, but I mean, it could just be like just a wrapper around a switch statement.
So, yeah,
And we should probably keep moving through because we want to get to
Yeah.
Matthews too.
Yeah. So we're at,
Yeah.
I figure we'll go till 12:30 on this one and then switch over.
Yeah.
to All
I
right.
did have
So,
one more thing on the moving, the move direction thing, which I think some of you guys probably also noticed too. And like Dakota, do you notice what the most common expression is in your function? Like a line that's repeated many times? It's highlighted right now, for example.
This dot current position or?
Yeah, return this dot current position, yeah. So and I think you use it in every single condition in the whole function, right? Like whatever happens, you're always returning this dot current position. Yeah, so what you could do is actually just have it just once, right? and you know where that would go?
Right at the end, yeah.
Right at the end, yeah.
It hit.
Yep, because no matter what happens, it's going to hit that last line, and I think that would be a good way to get it in there without having to repeat it so many times.
Yeah, you're one.
Yep.
yep. And, you know, a good sort of rule of thumb too is if you're looking at, you know, being tempted to have a bunch of early returns, that might be an indication that this is a good part of the code to break out into its own function as well.
Exactly. I was about to say that. If you do that with an if else loop, even though you don't have your return, but if you do that, keep the if else loop, move your return to the end, it is still going to, the code is still going to go through all the if else checks again anyway before it.
So let's see here. Okay, so your level one just returns this dot move direction. It's perfect, right? You just, you know, wrapped your functionality in our level one, just like we asked, so we could test it. Good deal. The other thing, so level two, what we've got here is, looks like Dakota has just done a for each, where he has taken all of his directions, and then for each of them, he has moved his block in that direction. Any comments on this?
I like it.
Yep, that's exactly the right thing to do.
Yep. I mean, proper. I mean, it's simple, straightforward.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, you just wanted to move for each direction in your array. So that's what you did for each direction in your array, move it. One thing I wonder, actually, and you guys can tell me this, whether or not this is good practice or not in JavaScript, is I noticed that like he's doing the assignment here in this loop where he's setting the current position to move direction. I wonder if, you know, JavaScript would reward just doing that update inside move direction instead of passing the current position back out and then asking you to assign it outside the function call.
Yeah, that's a good point because he's keeping it in kind of in state, right? Like inside of his class. So it's something that can be updated without having to return it all the time. And then you just kind of want the last version of it. So I think that would make some sense to me too.
Yeah. Go ahead. I thought I heard somebody getting started. And that gets us through level two. So honestly, you know, great work. Again, it works, right? So all of these things that we're saying now are kind of the second step, right? Like make it work. And then you can go back and refactor for honestly like beauty, right? Like make it look good. And then, you know, after that, then you can think about things like performance. And generally like I recommend those three steps in that order, right? Like get it to work, figure out your logic, make it look good, right? Clean it up, reduce lines, do some of those things that we're talking about now. And then at the end, you can think about things like performance. Does it, doing it one way or the other, make it faster or slower? You can do testing and whatnot if it is performance critical. A lot of times you won't even get to that third step because like 99% of the time, the code you write is not performance critical.
Yeah.
Right. If it's a web server, you're going to spend like 99% of your time waiting on network calls anyway. So what does it matter?
I want to add, I think, Eric, I don't know if you meant by the code looking good, did you mean readability or just the look and feel of the code? Because I think I would want to add that, make sure that you work on readable, because some codes I was watching and the guy made a very valid point. Most of the time, humans are going to be reading your code. The machine is just going to run it. Machine doesn't care how it is, but it's us humans who'd be looking and reading the code and trying to understand what's going on. So think from that perspective as well. When you're writing the code, is your code readable and understandable? So I like it that you've added so many comments and everything, So that's good. So that's the other thing that I've started doing that as well in my head. The moment some logic gets convoluted, or if I start doing too many smart things, I'm like, when I come back to this code 10 days from now, will I understand this? Probably not. So might as well not use this. The whole convoluted, complicated logic just to feel good at that moment. I've stopped doing that. I used to. I'm now like, nope. Let's keep it simple.
That's a great point. And yeah, that is what I meant by look good, like make it readable for sure. But yeah, I mean, I love that advice. That's probably some of the best advice you'll hear, right? Is like when you start to feel clever about the code you're writing, go back and simplify, because in 6 months, you will not remember where you left off and you will not feel nearly as clever trying to figure out what it is you did the first time. Great. All right, well, now it's time to switch over to Matt's code. It's going to say that file is no longer available, but we're going to ignore that. And then I'm just going to, let's see. I think that's fine. Okay, so same deal here, right? Same problem. We can see that Matt has got a bunch of attributes on this. So let's take a look. He's keeping up with his starting position, his current position, the same. He's keeping up with whether or not it is down vertically or horizontally or at all. He's keeping track of the move history in the block, which I think is interesting. He's keeping track of the current destination in the block. X distance and Y distance, and then he's calling update orientation. So quick, I guess first thing is, can you tell us what are X distance and Y distance?
Oh, those are distances to the destination.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then is down, so I'm guessing is down means is the block lying on its side one way or the other? And
Yeah.
Is down vertically or horizontally tells you which way?
Yeah, I think so.
Got it. Okay. Comments from code reviewers.
Congratulations on getting all the way to step 4. That's level 4. And I'm assuming that it passes the test. And I'm sure you, Matthew, are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. All right. So starting, just kudos. Good job.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, so it does maybe have something we discussed with Dakota about the idea of down vertically, down horizontally is down. Like, did you have a strong reason for setting it up like that? I guess those are those Booleans then?
Yeah, those would be
Yeah.
Booleans. So
Okay.
one thing too is probably in the constructor, I could actually delineate what each of these things are, like through comments. But yeah, I didn't think of that option as just having one value for each of the three. That would probably work better.
Might simplify your life a bit.
Yeah. The other thing, and the thing that, whoop, yeah, forget that. That threw me were the storing of the destination information in the block itself. I don't know, like just from a conceptual point of view, like I don't see those things as being like characteristics of the block. And we'll have to wait and see kind of like how you make use of that, because I think that'll be interesting. But that's the thing that stands out to me here as well, is just like, huh, I wonder why. All right, moving on. So I see that Matt has done sort of the thing that we kind of talked about and encouraged in the last one, right? So we've got separate functions for moving up, down, left, and right. We talked about why that's probably a pretty good idea in the last go around. So one thing I'll point out is, you know, even if you were using like the Booleans to keep track of your state, this is probably one of those places where you could have pretty easily done away with one of them, because here, you know, you're checking to see if it's not down, which means if the block is standing up tall, then move it like it's a tall block. You know, it really wouldn't have cost you much to check, like if it's not down vertically and it's not down horizontally, then do the thing, right? You could have even, you know, kind of gone above it, you know, if you wanted to make it really, really clear and readable, and said like, you know, block is up equals not down vertically or down horizontally, right?
Yeah.
And so just cut out like a variable to keep track of mentally.
And then feedback from me, and this is going to start as a question. Can it be not is down and is down at the same time? My guess would be no.
Yeah, it shouldn't be able to, but the code would allow it probably.
Okay, yeah, so like if I was, that would be like if I was somebody maintaining this in the future, lines 1 and 8 would confuse me, because I don't know if that's a, you know, a plausible thing to happen in this case, right? It doesn't seem like it, but so even if that was if not this is down, else if this is down, rather than if and else if, because those
Okay,
are
yeah.
mutually exclusive conditions, I think.
Yeah, so you're just saying should probably have been an else here.
Yeah, else would be fine.
Yeah, yeah,
If
okay,
else.
that makes sense.
So let's see here. So I see this update orientation function. I'm curious about what that's doing.
Yeah, so I can, let me explain the reasoning behind that, and then we can see if it's good reasoning or bad reasoning. My thought was like, okay, I just want these methods to move the block, and then I'll have this other thing that like checks on the state of the block and sees what's happening to it, rather than combining those things together. But I don't know if that is the best way to do it.
So I think, I mean, personally, I think this is probably, you know, if you're, especially if you're keeping track of, the orientation of the block using these multiple Booleans, this probably is got some safety to it, right? So you're checking on the basically, so instead of like having to remember to type the code to set the Booleans correctly, you've written a function to set them correctly based on the current coordinates of the block, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think at the very least, it keeps you from having to type and check on whether or not you did that in your code. So, I mean, I think at this point, like you've correctly identified a thing that you would have needed to have done as the programmer over and over again, and you split it out into a function. That's a good instinct.
Uh-huh. Definitely. And then I think I noticed this a few times. I'll just bring it up. I see it actually, I think twice here. So the ternaries. So const has multiple grid values. So my understanding of the ternary is expression if true, assign this value, colon, assign the other value. So in that first one, for example, const has multiple grid values equals this dot grid position length triple equals 2, right? That's either going to evaluate to true or false. And in your ternary, you assign true or false. So that's like an anti-pattern, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Is
So
what
that
that's
could
called.
just be deleted, basically. The
Ternary
false.
part of
Okay.
it could be deleted, yeah. And that would just give you a truthy value.
Yeah.
I think that's generally true. If you ever find yourself wanting to put question mark true false after a ternary, just don't. Like you're already
Okay,
done.
yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
so,
Right.
Yeah. And we see that come up in a lot of places, right? Like if you have a function that returns a, like, you know, if this value, then return true, else return false. Then you can just like return the Boolean expression, right? And it's gonna be true or false. So yeah, we see that a few times, a good bit.
And actually, yeah, maybe a little more kind of redundant logic here. I think so. You has multiple grid values, and then you're setting this is down based on the result of that that variable in a way. Could we? We can probably do without the has multiple grid values here, right? Isn't it? Because it's just equivalent to is down or this is down, I think. So couldn't we just base, for example, like the conditional on line 1 or 138 or whatever on this is down?
So I think has grid values, I think he's checking grid positions is the array. If the length is 2, then set it to 2, then set it to true. So the length cannot be more than 2. It will always be 2.
Yeah, there's it's just that's how big it is. So I think what I'm saying is I think that's has multiple grid values is just the same thing as saying this is down is true. So I think we just have an unnecessary variable there that doesn't have any particular extra function.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. And you know, as a matter of fact, maybe it's worth it to kind of go through and kind of refactor this a little bit. Right. So like in this case, you could really just replace this whole thing, right?
Yeah, okay, nice, yeah. And then also remove the ternary too. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And then the same thing here with the X values.
Eric, you'll have to change the if condition because that variable no longer exists, has multiple grid values. You just flip it off.
Yeah, just put in this is down for that. You got it.
A quick question for my JavaScript folks: the triple equals. If an undefined shows up on either side of this, am I going to get a false?
That'll be false. Yep.
Okay. So if that's the case, then really I don't actually need these interim values either, right?
Oh, okay.
And then
that makes sense.
So there's your logic.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah.
So yeah, but again, we're
Yeah. We are on the second pass, so it's like good to have multiple eyes. I like how, yeah, you used attributes really well in this, right? You're just tracking your state with your attributes. Your methods are updating your attributes. It's really good.
and you've named things well
Mhm.
also, which helps, right? Like it made doing that refactor easier because I could, oh yeah, I know what this is.
Yeah. Yeah, variable names are super important, and you did a good job. Function names at all of it. Yeah.
I think didn't they used to say that your function name should be verbs and your variable name should ideally be nouns or something of that sort. It helps to do keep it in perspective that your function is doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
I
agree.
like that rule.
Words
Yeah.
is fine.
Probably the X distance and Y distance that could be like distance to destination, I think, just to be more explicit on that.
Yeah, could be. I would agree. So this is what we meant by a dispatch function.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant by the switch case thing instead of the if else, so.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
you could add a default here saying if it is none of these, but I don't know.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's what and I don't know JavaScript syntax, so this may be weird, but and then I don't know. Right. Just especially since I've started typing all over your stuff, just note that this is a temporary copy stored on my own machine. I'm not messing up your code. All right, so talk to me about this stand-up function. What is this doing?
Yeah, I don't super remember, but I think, and that's probably what does this if it's not moved to destination. And the goal of this is if you start with a block that's down, you want to stand, all of my use cases started thinking about directionally moving the block, started with it moving, with it standing up. And so basically I just wanted to move the block to stand up, but towards the direction that's closer.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's, that's one of the things that in real life I probably would like kind of encourage going back and doing is most languages and systems support a thing called documentation comments or doc comments that you can sort of like write immediately before or inside of a function using a special syntax that kind of gets converted into documentation at some point. Those are probably good things to have, especially around your functions. So that, again, just a quick explanation of this is what this function does. It takes this, it does this. Especially like for me, especially in dynamic languages, that becomes really important because you don't have as many clues in the function definition itself as to what's going on.
And like you have this is a pretty well-developed program. It's pretty big. It's starting to accumulate some lines, do some different things, and as it grows, the documentation then becomes like really helpful because someone might just have to in the future just go back and change one method, and they just want to jump to that method. They don't want to have to follow all the rather than having to read through all your previous logic, they can kind of see what the method does, what the attributes are, and pick up from there rather than reading through. So,
Right. And in those kinds of comments, you definitely want to be as broad as possible, right? Because the other thing about comments, of course, is that a comment's either a lie or it's going to be. If based on how diligent folks are about updating things. And so, if you're as broad as possible, something like this function makes the block stand up, which means X. and say what it does, but don't say anything about how it does it, you've, freed
Yeah.
yourself up to make some implementation changes inside the function without needing to update those comments.
Right.
Cool. Okay, so these, first of all, let me just say that I thought this was a very clever approach.
Yeah.
Where you like, well, I only want to go over one block, so I'm going to pick the 3 moves that take me over one block.
Yeah. I like that too. And this is a really good kind of immediate example of the abstraction that we are kind of referring to in Dakota's case. You just can look at it and see 3 methods and know what's going on. So
Yep. Now, I think my question is going to be, how did this work?
Yeah, difficult. I mean, I thought I had an initial solution where you could just stand up the block, move 2 until you got kind of close to it, and then just move 1 once you're close to the destination. But that ended up not working out because, well, you'll see later, there's a more efficient way to move the block then that avoids having to do those 3 moves at the end.
All right, so is that what this is? This move 1 step to destination? So this is.
Oh yeah, so that will basically move the
I
block
see.
1 step at a time to the
And
destination.
this
Yeah.
just sorts of does it until you're at the destination.
Yeah. And probably the strange thing there is that the modular operator and how that works.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. So it's like if it has to be, I guess, yeah, you're looking at multiples of 3, and it has to be a multiple of 3 for it to be lining up. Is that kind of the idea there?
Yeah, I think because you want to move the block, but then once it's flipped over, you want to rotate it to line up so that it will sync up for its destination. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah, that's some serious thinking. And I see here in level 1 that you sort of did the thing that we mentioned earlier, right? Where you're just sort of keeping track of the grid position inside the block. And so you're not, assigning it anywhere. You're just making moves, spitting out the current position. Very good. Then for level 2, you're initializing your move history. You're getting started with your start position. You update your orientation. Let's see. I wonder. Oh, these are all still block methods. Okay. Okay. So you got methods on the block. I was like, where's this coming from? Never mind. I see it now. For each make, move, and return in this grid position. Okay.
That's my fault. That's how I wrote the test. That's how I interpreted the directions.
Oh,
He was just
got
going
it.
with
No,
going with what I did. Yeah.
no, that makes sense. So let's see, there's level 3. And so you're passing all the tests up to level 4, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So I think one thing to keep in mind, and this, we're getting very close, so this will be my last sort of comment. Did you see that article I sent you about searching across the space, the A star and the breadth first and all of that?
Yeah,
Oh,
that was really
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So one thing, and I think you can correct me. I see with the sort of the move 1 space and all that, is that your approach here was that you were looking at the whole problem space and you were saying, I need to figure out the path that I can take to the end and then move the block down that path, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way those other approaches work actually is that you legitimately sort of search each state that it could be in. So you basically say, okay, block, if I move you up 1, left 1, down 1, and right 1, these are the places where you could be. So I can basically take it, check what the result of that next move would be, and then search from that next move, right? And go, okay, well, if I move you, so it's sort of like do and check, right? And the computer is pretty good at that. So you don't have to be as directive at first, right? Like you really are finding the path instead of deciding the path. And that's going to be the thing that kind of helps you get from level 4 to level 5, because with level 5, the addition of the obstacles makes it really, really hard to kind of look at the overall thing and go, oh, you just go there.
Yeah,
Because I mean, you're starting to stretch the limits of what you can do as a human, and we can step back and see the whole thing at one time, and the computer can't do that. So it's I think that's the thing that gets you from level 4 to level 5 is sort of that, let me keep track of all the things I've tried and which ones get me closer to the goal. Let me check the one that got me the closest and see if that, how far that gets me, and do that sort of that search across the various spaces. But it's kind of a, I think that's the only thing I think that's the thing that's kind of got you stuck on level 4 is trying to zoom out, see the path, and then tell the block what it is, versus the way you would do it if you were like stuck in a maze, right? Like you would write down where you went, which turns you made. If you got to a dead end, you'd backtrack and then go to a different turn and try a different way. Because, if you were stuck in a maze, then you wouldn't have the information of what it looks like from above, right?
yeah. What
So great work on this, by the way. Some really clever stuff in here too.
did anyone do the level 5 solution, and like what data structures would you use just to store that info?
So I'm going to post my own solution to this up on the repo as well. But I'll show you real quick. We'll exit this. Let's see here. Oh, I could just do there we go. Oh. So you can see, like, here's my level 5 function, but it all depends on this find path, which is actually defined up here, all the way on level 3, actually. So the way it works is you start off with a thing called a queue, and I've given it a fancy name of search queue, but it's really just a queue that has specific types of things in it. So try to ignore everything between curly brackets. That's all like static typing stuff. It's just a queue, right? And the first thing I put in that queue is the list of spaces I've been to, and then my current block. And then I just keep track of where I've been. And then so as long as the queue has stuff in it, I take the last item off the queue. I check to see, is this my destination? If it is, then I return the path that came with it. Otherwise, I add it to my list of things that I've visited. Or I check to see if I've been here already. If I have, then I skip it. If not, then I add it to my list of things visited. And then I sort of do the thing that I just described, right? I go, okay, well, for each direction I could move, up, right, left, or down, I create a block moved to that position. This is there for the difference between level 4 and 5. That just basically checks to see, did I hit an obstacle and am I still on the grid, which matters for level 5, doesn't matter for level 3 or 4. So if this is an okay move to have made, then I keep going. I check to see, have I visited the new block before, this new block position before? If I have, then I skip it. But if I haven't, then I update the path, and then I just shove that path and block back in my queue, and I go to check the next one. And so it does that sort of, this is not like the super fanciest one, but this is the one that basically just like starts at the middle and then searches a ring around it every time until the ring hits the target and goes, oh, there it is. That's how I got there, and returns your path. So I'm going to put this up. You guys feel free to take a look at that. But this is just really like a slightly modified breadth first search is all that is. That just takes, the move physics of the block into account. All right. Last thing, very important thing for today. We promised fabulous prizes. And so we're about to hand out fabulous prizes. Let's find my tab that's got the spinner on it. So we got two level 2 passing submissions for the challenge today. So I don't know who wins. We're about to spin the wheel and find out.
Can we just get mics on and get a round of applause for the level 2s just real quick? Just real quick.
Woo! Good job. Sorry, Lawrence. I clicked before I heard you.
No, you're good. You're good. Back to you in the studio. Sorry.
So here we go. Our winner for our grand prize IntelliJ IDEA license is Dakota. So Dakota, get with Lawrence to get your license code. You are our grand prize winner today. But Matt, don't feel bad. We promised prizes. So I need you to send me your email address on Slack and then check on your inbox for your Amazon gift card.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool.
And same for you as well, Dakota. If you would send me your email in Slack, I'll get that code to you this week. And it's actually for JetBrains, so you can use it for IntelliJ or other of their products for 1 year. Congratulations.
All right. Thank you guys to everybody who participated. This was a lot of fun. I wasn't sure how today was going to go because it's the first time we've done it. I thought this was kind of a neat way to handle it. So this went well. I hope it was beneficial for you guys as you continue your coding journey. Gave you some things to think about. Gave all of us some things to think about, I hope. Look forward to seeing everyone next week when we will be back to our regular Coding Dojo schedule. We're putting out our call again for drivers. So if you are interested in driving for the Coding Dojo, please reach out. You can reach out to me, Lawrence, Charles, Barinder, Dennis was on here earlier, or just, shout it out in the code channel that you would be interested in driving. We will get you added to the schedule. Thanks so much, guys. I had a great time today. I hope you did as well. We'll see you next week.
Y'all have a great day and great week. See you next week.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.